What's up, Nubians? Welcome to techn00bians, part of the Geekish Network. This is your weekly deep dive into video games steeped in blackness. With me, we have our man with a million plans, Chuck,
What's up, everyone?
our producer, sleuther, and deducer, Shanae.
Hey, folks.
We have our engineer with no peer, Leon.
What's up, people?
And we got Travis.
Huh?
I mean, seriously, I don't actually really know what Travis does here, but like, he's here. As always, I'm your hostess with the mostest, Cherie. And for those of you who don't know, techn00bians is your weekly video game live stream and podcast hosted by Black industry technology professionals, where we discuss the what, when, and how you can get into this world of technology, specifically the video game industry. And we are here to sustain, inspire, nurture successful creative technologists in their pursuit of Black excellence and content development. Now, before we get started here, as you all may know, there was some very big news right now out of the gaming world with the Activision Blizzard lawsuit that was filed by the state of California's Department of Fair and Equal Housing. We definitely need to talk about this. We need to talk about the toxic culture in gaming, specifically the industry. Though, of course, like the attitudes are prevalent in all of gaming. But, of course, this is a really important topic. So I want to spend a little extra time on it today, and we're going to make that our long topic. So before we get into that, though, let's kick things off with our news segment, techn00bians. So, Travis, do you want to start us off here? I think you have some news for us.
Yeah, I was checking out Gamma Sutra, as I do, which if you're interested in the game industry, you really should bookmark Gamma Sutra.
Mm-hmm.
It's where a lot of the industry professionals go actually to look at news. And it says that over half of U.S. households now own a video game console. So everybody, let's pause a little bit for job security. All right.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
And so the Consumer Technology Association, reported that 53% of U.S. households now own video game consoles, and it ticked up 10% year over year. And I'm thinking it's all because of the pandemic, really. I mean, if you're in your house, like, what else you gonna do, right? So of those surveyed, 41% of those users now own a prior generation console. So the 360 or the PlayStation 3 or 4, Nintendo Wii, and Switch. Wow, 26%
I
of
like the
respondents on
silent
the Xbox
commentary
Series
there.
X or PlayStation 5. Huh? I'm petty. I'm the mayor of petty.
He didn't even say the Wii U, y'all.
Right,
He
yeah.
said Wii to Switch.
Yes. And they reported that 30% of those surveyed want to purchase a console in the next 12 months. Good luck with that, by the way.
You can get a Switch OLED,
That's true.
maybe, right?
No, you can't actually. Those are all sold out.
Oh, okay, never
Yeah,
mind.
and so
Right.
for those looking to purchase a new console, basically 21% plan to buy a next generation console, while 15% want to buy a recent, or past generation console.
Listen, you're not getting a PS5, y'all. Just go ahead and
I heard.
just settle into the other consoles.
I think what it does, aside from like I said, the obvious job security part, I think that really what this is showing is that we can officially stop saying that this is niche. We can officially stop saying that or being surprised when people are gamers, right? Like,
Right?
half of us are, okay, and I think last time I checked, there are more women on the earth than there are men.
Still.
And so this just further supports, my assertion, and actually some documented proof that there are more women gamers than there are men.
Yeah. Can I just want to throw out here also, like, and I know you threw a little shade with them, but I do have to kind of actually give a little credit to Nintendo for helping to kind of expand this base of gamers with the Wii. I mean, I remember I was still working at EA at the time when the Wii came out. And that was the first time I had people in my life who were not gamers who came to the one person who they knew in their life that was a gamer and said, "Shimmy, can you get me the Wii?" And I bought 9 Wii's for people.
Yep.
I was wheeling and dealing. I was like jumping into lotteries. I was getting my friends at GameStop to hide them in the back room. And
When I
bought
tell you,
9 Wii's for people. Like I said, that was my aunt. That was my mom's best friend. That was like my cousin. That
That's
was like
how it
all these
works.
random people who were not gamers.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the thing that is incontrovertible here, though, is that Nintendo, through the Switch and the DS and the Game Boy, kills everybody in console sales.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
well, that's because they're not really that concerned with what generation they're in now, right? I mean, their hardware is always woefully underpowered. Okay, it's always like half a generation ahead of where
We,
it
we,
should
we
be.
call
Travis,
that
can you
we call
drop
that
your
price
nose a
point
little bit?
accessible, Travis.
No,
seriously,
I call that
like-
Nintendo basically just being Nintendo.
But see, but no, honestly though, like one of the reasons why you do wind up with Nintendo systems that are not in the same like technological category is, and you also look at the price point, and you're like, oh, this costs 300 and that's 500. When you have your moms and your dads and your grandparents or whoever's like interested in gaming, they walk into Walmart, Target, or a game store,
Mhm.
and they see a $200 difference. That $200 difference is the difference between saving up for something, like really making a decision and making an impulse buy.
Well, Sinead, like throughout all my, pettiness and poo-pooing of Nintendo,
You own like
never,
two, don't you?
never do you hear me say that they aren't excellent business people.
No, not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
They know their target audience extremely well,
Yes.
right? And I will never, ever, ever take that away from them. And
Oh no,
what I
this
have
was
said
not
on-
refuting you. This was more of a yes and. Like, this is part of the reason why
well,
their
yeah,
stuff is so
'cause
underpowered.
I'm just saying, like what I've said,
And
and just to set the record straight, okay, I don't hate Nintendo. I am just not their target audience, and I am at peace with that.
Wait, do you
Right.
do you own a Switch? Out of curiosity, Travis.
My daughter has my Switch.
Oh, sure.
Okay, all right.
just
Yeah.
like all the guys at my job.
I would no.
It was their girlfriends and wives playing Nintendogs, not them.
So it depends on. So it would depend on who you ask. If you ask me, I don't own. I don't own a Switch. Actually, if you ask my daughter, she would tell you I don't own a Switch either. Even though I
the
swear
reason why
I
I
bought
asked
it.
it
I think
wasn't to refute your point. The reason I asked was because, like you said, you're not the target audience for Switch. I agree with that, but you still own one.
it's in your household.
Because you have one in your
your
household, right?
household,
Which is
yeah.
I don't
which is-
know where it is.
it's in the household somewhere.
It's
Which is
somewhere
interesting,
hanging out with my
right?
Vita, probably.
Like even the previous generation, even like during the Wii, remember there was that movement around the Wii 60 everyone
Mm-hmm.
talked about? Like, yeah, you should get a Wii and a 360. And Nintendo's like, no, we just want you to get a Wii and other Nintendo games. But the Wii 60 thing was like a thing for real.
It was a thing for real.
Like,
And
can
let's
we
be
all
honest.
agree? Can we all agree though that the Wii is just the worst name for a console?
terrible.
No, it's about us. We.
It's about we.
It's about
That
we.
is
It's
what
about
they
we,
said.
Travis. It's about we. Just get over that.
Now you know damn well that's not what you think about. So all right, whatever.
Don't talk about my weed.
I'ma just let it
Don't
go.
talk about my weed, Travis. We're in a public forum right
Next
now.
story.
Yes.
Triggered.
This
Triggered
doesn't
right
Is this
really
a
like
good night,
segue.
everybody moment kind of
Yeah.
thing?
Time out.
now. No, right?
I mean, it doesn't
But,
entirely segue into the next story or anything.
Please.
But let's talk. I do have a story here, actually, about Netflix. So,
Mhm.
Netflix actually just canned 3 high-level marketing execs for griping about their management over Slack.
Ooh.
The employees said that they thought the messages were private. This is all according to the Hollywood Reporter. They were caught criticizing Jonathan Helfgott, who's VP of the Original Films Marketing, and Bozoma St. John, who is the Chief Marketing Officer. Now, I will mention that shockingly, none of the comments were reported to have focused on race or gender. Bozoma St. John is a Black woman, but they were, quote, critical personal comments made over the course of several months about marketing leadership. So I think this is kind of interesting because the employees, it's not like they were reprimanded, they were fired. And the reason why that Netflix gave that they were fired is because they say they have a culture of radical transparency that's in line. If you folks have heard of the book Radical Candor,
Mhm.
it's in line with that book, Radical Candor.
Mm.
So they felt that the employees should have offered the criticism directly to leadership instead of surreptitiously, and they said that it was a violation of their culture. And I was just I thought this was kind of interesting on a few different levels. because one, I mean, nothing you say, nothing you write on Slack, first of all, or any of these any of these
It's
chat
private.
It's not
programs,
private.
nothing's private. It doesn't matter if there's a little lock symbol. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter, like nothing's private.
And-
Um,
yeah.
but I thought it was interesting though that they would choose to make this, like, I guess I felt like there was an opportunity, like a learning opportunity here, to kind of be like, oh, we're going to reprimand these people, and this is the reason why, because this is a violation of the culture, as opposed to just firing them outright. So I'm just kind of curious what folks think about this, because I personally feel like this is something that happens at every company, and probably something that everybody has done.
Well,
I
Go ahead,
think
Leon.
the core issue here, right? You talk about their HR saying, well, this violates our culture of radical candor, which is for the people, right? But in reality, HR isn't for the people. HR is to insulate and protect the organization and the leadership. They literally aren't your friend, right? So anything that you put in a document or any kind of online network, HR can and will use it against you, much like your Miranda rights.
This is true.
So, Ted Sarandis also made a comment. It's also worth noting that we don't proactively monitor Slack or email. The Slack channel was open, so anyone could access the conversations, even though the employees concerned thought it was private.
Yeah. That is the other thing. Like, I have a feeling that this was probably like they had like a marketing channel or something like that that you could search for, and anybody
Mhm.
could join, because they found out about it because an employee, they said, happened upon it. And it was over the course of several months, and it seemed like some of the comments were made like actively while a meeting was going on with some of with the marketing execs that were being criticized. And so that's why Netflix was like, well, they should have said it directly to those folks.
Yes.
And while I don't entirely disagree, I'm also kind of like
Well, I
is
just look
this
at like
human
how
nature.
does
Anyways,
yeah,
go ahead.
how does this resolution help to reinforce radical candor within your organization? Like,
Exact
I mean, how
opposite.
like
well,
it's exact
oh,
opposite.
it
I mean,
does.
well, the mistake they made, right? Like the real mistake they made was talking about this within a public company owned channel, right?
Yeah, take that to your text
Yeah,
chat.
all they're basically telling people is to take it to your text chat, take it to your like your messenger or some other like non-work oriented thing. But okay, so number one, people are people, all right? And they admitted, like it was admitted that there was nothing that was sexist or racist or otherwise out of bounds. Like
Mhm.
they were like if it was abusive language, kick their butts to the curb.
Yeah,
If it's just people being like, frustrated about whatever, like, listen, we're all in the middle of a panorama pan pizza still, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
We're trying to figure this whole thing out, and
Yeah.
people talk about stuff, and maybe they didn't have the most healthy way of doing that, but it doesn't feel like if your goal is to reinforce that, hey, we care about radical candor here, so we're going to fire you for being radically candorous or for your radical candor in an open space. Like, well, wait, if it was an open space, isn't that radical candor
Well,
or something?
I think
And
once again, I think that technology, right, is at odds with how we do things, right?
Mhm.
And people have to relearn the rules, right? Or be more conscious of the rules, right? We're now in an era of of humanity where everything you do practically is recorded in 4K. Okay, it is
Yeah.
Orwellian to the nth degree. So watch your mouth
well,
because it
Right.
is being recorded,
well,
right?
Yeah.
And
Well-
unless you are sure that you are in a safe space, watch your mouth.
I'm digging
So-
through some of the comments, and they said they were personal comments against the person. They were
They were
personal
personal.
attacks. They
Yes.
weren't professional comments. Like you can't talk about somebody's person at work.
That's fair. That's fair.
That is fair.
Like you can't be like that nappy headed woman gets on my nerves.
Well, that's when it gets. That's when it
and
gets.
that's when it
racist.
got personal.
But that.
Well,
But they
that's
said,
the thing
they
I
said
thought
it
was
wasn't racist
interesting.
though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is they made a point.
Unless it came
like,
from
even-
another black person.
Yeah. But
Which
Netflix
could
made
be
a
the
point to say
case. Which could
it had nothing to do with race, and it didn't have to do with like gender, which like I said,
yeah.
shock of all shocks, because like whenever black people are involved, regardless of someone trying to be professional, it will always somehow
Yeah,
devolve
it
into
could be like
That's very true.
that person's
Yeah.
messy like the clothes they wear.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
you say
Right,
something
Leon.
like that, and they're like, "Yo, you can't attack that person. You can attack
Yeah.
their work and the mess they make at work, but don't attack the person."
Yeah. Go ahead,
It
Leon.
really,
Yeah.
thank you. Really, what this boils down to is that if you're going to have a conversation that you want to be private or don't want to get back to any party for whatever reason, then use an encrypted media. Signal is a very good choice. WhatsApp is also another choice.
Hmm.
You can even set your messages so that they auto delete after a certain period of time, right? So literally have the conversation in person or use an
Hmm.
encrypted message stream, but definitely don't use an open network like just a random Slack channel that someone can search for.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
you know,
Or
And
also
don't put
phone
it on an
call.
open
Have
Slack channel.
have your phone call. Have a phone call
Yeah,
about it.
do a
Yeah.
phone call.
I did want to touch on something Travis mentioned because he did make a really good point about like the sort of disconnect between like human nature and the technology we use to sort of communicate and stuff as well. And like I said, I'm not excusing this whatsoever, even though I do like not having all the information. It does sound pretty extreme to go straight to firing as opposed to like other methods of
Correction.
correction.
Yeah. Mm.
But yeah, I mean, like if the argument was the venue that they used, like that's one thing. If the argument was that they even had any sort of like conflicting or frustrated feelings they need to express, well, now you're talking about human nature.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we have all been there. I mean, game development, we talk about how hard game development is. We talk about how hard like working within a team is, even though it is a necessary thing in order to build software, especially software as complex as these big AAA and quad A level games. Like you have to be able to work with people. You have to be able to work in a team, but you also aren't a robot. You're also a real human being. And,
Yes.
being able to express frustration in healthy ways is important. And I just sort of like it's another thing
Yeah.
for us to keep in mind of, especially because in the before times, a lot of these conversations probably would have taken place in
In
person
person.
over lunch or in a conference room or
Hmm.
something. And now because we're all remote, they tend to take place on company mandated devices and venues. And yeah, just a cautionary tale for folks, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, yeah.
And
And
also
you
It
something
can't
to
never
you
mention.
goes
can't text somebody's
away.
person. I can't be like, yo, Cherie, Travis gets on my nerves. If I called him in the office, I'll smack him in his mouth. I can't
I mean,
put that on a Slack
that's
channel.
Well, see,
fine.
I think the first half of
You
that,
couldn't
for
say-
real talk, I think the first half of that is within bounds.
Yeah, that
Travis gets on
is.
my
But I
nerves,
think it's the personal
right?
attack problem.
No offense, Travis, you're being
I,
used.
well,
as
I,
an example
well,
there.
I mean,
But the first
truth be
half of that, I
told,
think, is within bounds. The I would like to slap him in his mouth. That's where you're out of bounds.
That's where you're
at
out of
that point,
bounds.
well,
Yeah.
truth
right?
be told, I get on my nerves.
Yeah, and sometimes you write that to yourself, right? You're just
Mhm,
like, man, I
mhm.
got on my nerves today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
hate myself for this.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll kind of mention along this, because this one thing I will say that was kind of interesting. So there were two employees that I mentioned who were criticized,
Mhm.
Bosma St. John, and then also the direct manager of these employees, whose name was Jonathan Helfgott. The direct manager did not want to fire the employees.
Yeah.
He actually was fighting for them to retain them, but he eventually, as I said, succumbed to internal pressure. So I really want to see, like, I mean, I'm waiting for basically like the chat logs or whatever to actually be released as opposed to like just the characterizations,
Yeah.
because you can personal doesn't really mean anything. You know what I mean? Like it says, oh, there are personal comments. I'm like, what are the personal comments? I just want to know what
Yeah.
it means.
Yeah, yeah. And
Um,
also, it seemed like Netflix wanted to fire these people anyway.
I think so.
I think that's what it comes down to. They made it easy. Like they're not performing. Then they're frustrated. That they probably said something personal about their boss and their boss's boss. And they're like, you know what? We don't really want them or need them. And that place does that. As an ex employee of Netflix, if you don't go talk to your boss about your issues and you talk to somebody else, that's shunned. That's very, very shunned. Like anytime
Yeah.
I had an issue with my boss, I could literally just walk in. Eugene, I need to talk to you right now, and walk in the office and vent, and she would have to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And then
that's, and honestly, I
Mhm.
think that's where they kind of fall down with radical candor part, because
Mhm.
like, uh, actual like disclosure, I actually led a book club about radical candor at my at my
Mhm.
company. So I'm familiar with the book and the concepts and everything like that for it. I feel like it was kind of like a miss to me for Netflix to not say, you know what, let's actually, let's actually go in and speak with these employees and tell them where they missed on out with like with
Yes.
regards to like
Yeah.
adhering to our values. And it could
Yes.
be like, this is your final chance sort of thing. If you see this again, then this is going to be, then we're gonna cut
Like
you loose.
you won't be surprised at the
That's out
consequences.
of Netflix culture. What you just said there. That sounds out of culture.
Fair.
We
fair.
hired you to be the best, and if you come any other form, this is not for you.
Okay.
This is
All right.
not for you. You know that coming in. They let you know that. They reiterate that to you over and over again. You
Yeah.
mess up, you're gone.
Mm.
You have to play like Kobe in game 6 every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
All right. Well, you know what? Let us jump on. This is a good place for us to jump onto our next story here.
Mhm.
I believe Leon, you've got a story for us here.
I do. So we've got some news out of Redwood City in California. Electronic Arts has decided to re-release one of their own IPs. So they're re-releasing and rebuilding Dead Space from the ground up. This isn't just a texture swap or upresing. They're actually rebuilding the game, rebuilding all the 3D models using modern technology to allow them to kind of exceed some of the limitations they had before, taking elements of the game they made in sequels and pulling it in. So for me, this is exciting. So this is one of my favorite games. I love Dead Space. I love its atmosphere. I say there are very few games that handle audio as so sophisticated means that a measure as Dead Space did. I think it's also interesting when we talked a few weeks ago about IP and the cycle and new consoles, and we saw Microsoft do this a couple years ago where they realized that there was an entire generation that had never played Halo. So Dead Space at 12 years, it's half a generation. So there are gamers now that have never played that game. Now, granted, from a strict rating perspective, they 12-year-olds should probably not be playing Dead Space, but it's cool. And also selfishly, it's a game that's about an engineer. So I dig that as well. So I'm a big fan of Dead Space. I'm really looking forward to it. I saw it on Game Pass and was thinking about replaying it, but now I'm actually going to wait for the rebuild.
I bought this game twice and will never ever play it. Never ever play it. I don't play horror games, and every time I watch this game, people play it, I have a heart attack every single time.
And what are you attracted to? The install process?
Man, no, just I want to
The
support
cover
the
art.
game. The game is so good.
Like a severed arm, like
but I
floating
buy
in the air,
Resident
isn't it?
Evil, and I won't play Resident Evil. I buy it every console. Every
Why
version.
are you buying these
He's
Because
games?
I'm
He
supporting
can't
the
support it,
industry,
like-
Travis.
Just give them
Supporting the
away or
industry.
something.
You know what?
Put my money where my mouth is, Travis.
I like how he said that. Like I'm supposed to know. Like I'm supporting the industry, Travis. That's why.
I'm carrying the industry on my back. I'm carrying it on my back over here.
I wound up playing Dead Space on accident because I remember this is back when I worked at Capcom. And if y'all don't know, back in the day, back when we used to work in offices and stuff, a lot of companies have company stores. And so, we'd often drive down to the EA campus and buy some of the games from their company store. And same thing, they come in, they buy some from the Capcom store. And a friend of mine, I couldn't go. And one of my colleagues said, "Hey, I'll pick up Rock Band 3 for you." I'm like, "Yeah, awesome." I'm like, "Yeah, if they don't have it, what should I get you?" I'm like, "I don't know, maybe this Dead Space thing." And he comes back with Dead Space, and I was so disappointed because I really wanted to play Rock Band 3. You can't see this room; it's actually got 7 plastic guitars in it and 2 plastic drum kits. But I played that game, and it was so surprisingly good. I say this: I'm working at Capcom. We're making games with zombies. We owned the horror genre for a while, right? And I'm playing this game, and I'm like, oh, jump scare, whatever. Oh, that body over there is definitely gonna come to life. I walk by it 3 times, it doesn't come to life. The 4th time I walk by it, it comes to life. I'm like, oh my God, you scared me half to death. How dare you? They did really, really smart things with it. But
So,
for me,
Shanae.
if I could say one thing, the most like the most innovative thing they did to me, they did that I recognize in this game is because games were all about headshots, right? Especially zombie games.
Right.
They said we're not going to do headshots. We're going to have you cut off its arms.
Mhm.
And that little change blew my mind. It completely changed the gameplay.
So what you're saying is that you got past the install.
I did. I got past the install. I played the first one. I played the second one.
All right, so you're supporting the industry is basically what you're saying. Right?
I am.
Well, I'm gonna say in Chuck's defense,
only bought it once too.
Yeah, I also played Dead Space. I actually worked at EA on Dead Space 2, but I worked but I played the first Dead Space. And dude, if you don't play horror games, do not play this game.
Exactly.
Actually, it was really scary.
That was one of the things that I thought was a really interesting takeaway from Dead Space 1 that they decided to kind of to make sure that they fixed for Dead Space 2. And I'm hoping they fix this in the remake. Is they said they were looking at the beats and stuff that they had for the game, and they realized, they're checking also, their telemetry and everything to kind of and metrics to see like how far people got in the game, and a vast majority of players did not finish their game. And a lot of this, they said, was because they realized people's anxiety stayed high the entire time, because like, and it was for the reason like my sister mentioned, right? The
Mhm.
thing that stopped me from playing Dead Space, like when I was playing it, was when I walked past that body several times. It was just laying there on the ground, and then one time I walked past it and it jumped up, and I was like,
Yep.
I'm done. I
Yep.
cannot play this game because there's no safe spaces in this game. Like
Yeah.
I'm like that got me. I was like, I have to know where I have a safe space.
I was
The
legitimately
map
mad at
was
the
cool
designer.
though. The map
It was
pops out in
I
front
have-
cool.
of
It was
you.
brilliant.
The map
have-
system's smart. I was like, oh, this is great. It sounds great.
But I
And
but
I
I
was like,
think-
oh, it's not dead? You gotta cut off the limbs.
That
No,
got me.
run.
You
run.
know what's interesting
Go ahead,
about this
Leon. Go ahead,
conversation
Leon.
for me? What's interesting is that I have a completely different experience with Dead Space than everybody on this. Like for me, and I was still in sort of this examine mode the whole time with Dead Space. I was I was amazed at their level of UI integration.
Mhm.
Oh
Um,
yes.
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
so to me, Dead Space wasn't even about it being scary because I'm very hard to scare. Instead, I was like, whoever made this UI, give them three
Yep.
raises.
I agree.
Well,
Yeah.
what
I agree.
what UI, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
health bar was
Yes.
integrated into the character. It was
Exactly.
beautiful.
And the
Uh,
wayfinding too
The
was
wayfinding
just
was dope.
brilliant.
They
So
did.
so for me, that was, so when people talk about Dead Space, all I'm doing is I'm going, man, that UI was awesome.
But there's one other comment I want to make about the safe space, which goes into the audio, which is fun. So when I was playing Dead Space, my son was just born. So I had a really nice pair of 5.1 headphones that I was playing the game on. And that would actually help because you would get directional sound. There's something behind me, right? And I would look, and there was a necromorph, except for you went out into the vacuum of space. It's one of the few games where there was no sound in space. So I thought I was safe. Like, yeah, I can figure this lock. And I just happened to turn around and the thing's right in my face. And I'm like dropping the control.
No,
Right.
I don't see. I can't.
They did so many brilliant things. They said they won tons of awards for the audio, and for
Yeah.
there's this one scene I don't even remember what it was. It was near the end of the game.
The tentacle.
The audio, and the lighting. Like there was some large machine that was just turning, and the lighting effects they had on there were absolutely gorgeous. And I was like, this games are art, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's it, right? Like a lot, like we've always said that, this notion of games are art and they can evoke emotion. And I can think of very few games that evoke emotions of fear, emotions of cringing. Remember when you had to inject like the needle into your eye? I think
That was in
Dead
2.
Space 2.
Yeah.
And I was like freaking out because you actually had to like target it into your retina. And 12 years later, I still have strong emotions and feelings about Dead Space. And so that is an excellent piece of art. And I'm glad that EA recognizes that this is something that they want to bring back. And I'm excited, and I'll definitely be purchasing this. I'll be pre-ordering it. And I hate pre-orders, but I'll be pre-ordering.
Maybe the next one will be on the cloud so that Charles doesn't have to install it.
All this judgment. All this.
There's no
First
game.
of all, Travis, I own the physical versions of it. I own the physical versions of it. I own the collector's edition of it, the limited legendary edition.
Why are
of
you
it.
flexing and you ain't even played it?
It doesn't matter. I watched
does
somebody
matter.
play it. I watched somebody play it. So I was like, I'm not gonna play this game.
Chuck, you should gift those to some people.
No one
Like,
gets.
I
my
bought Dead
gifts. How
Stranding.
precious. What's up?
Did you play it?
No, I'm kidding. I didn't buy it again.
The one thing that I don't remember what year this was for GDC. It was after Dead Space came out,
Uh-huh.
and this week was GDC, by the way, in case anyone
Mhm.
missed it. I know most of us missed it too. But one year at GDC, they did a postmortem on Dead Space,
Mm-hmm.
and I was still working at Capcom at the time, and so like as a a producer on Resident Evil games and an employee of Capcom where we make zombie games, I was like, let me see how they went about designing this, and it was super interesting because they talked about how so much of the original DNA from Dead Space came from Resident Evil 4, and they looked at Resident Evil 4, which they considered one of the best games of all time in the horror space, and they said, what does it do wrong? And they basically just went in and said, let's do a retrospective on this game and let's make Resident Evil 4 better. It's probably still on the GDC, it's
Yeah.
probably on the Vault or
It's
something
in
like
the vault.
that. Yeah, you guys should definitely Google that, check it out, see if it's on YouTube, or I don't know, pay $5,000 for the Vault. Find somebody else's account so you can get in the Vault. It was really good stuff.
No,
Uh,
that's awesome.
can I
Oh,
can I
sorry.
make one last
Go
comment
ahead.
on
Go
that?
ahead, Jeff. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Dead Space, the creative director said they used to look at mangled car accidents and stuff like that to get
Oh,
inspired of how to
Yeah,
create the creatures. That's what got me like curious about the game. I was like, oh, what did they
yeah.
do? They used to look like car accidents, animal maimings, all kinds of things to create this
Did it
yeah.
game.
did it get it you did it get you really curious though, Chuck?
It did get me really curious, but I won't play
Curious
it.
enough to
I
buy
won't
it.
play
Like,
it.
not play it.
I won't
Not
play
play it.
it. Don't
Yeah.
judge me. Don't judge me.
You're too
Yeah, there's
late
some-
I
to the
don't.
there's
party.
some-
I don't play scary games
You're far
because
too late.
things live with me. I think
that,
about
that
them
actually
knowing I
we
die.
might revisit some of that actually in our long topic today too, because there's
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
that stuff that came out of
Hmm.
that requirement too for folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. With that, let's go on to our long topic
Mhm.
because this is going to be an important discussion. I kind of talked a little bit about it, like in the intro here. But we want to talk a little bit about Activision Blizzard, the lawsuit that was just announced this week. They're being sued by the state of California, and we just want to talk about like the toxic culture of the gaming industry in general. I mean, gaming in general, gaming industry in specific, right here. But to start us off here, does anyone want to just give like a quick, background here as to like what this lawsuit's about? What's the news with Activision Blizzard? I'll fill in the gaps here.
I mean, the gist of it is, like you said, the state of California Fair Employment and Housing Agency is like levied a lawsuit against Activision Blizzard. The lawsuit actually was, I think they've been working with Blizzard for about this behind the scenes for a bit, but now officially has become public. Because I think discussions broke down, and what they're alleging is a systematic like culture of abuse and discrimination against women specifically, that women were passed over for jobs when they were more qualified or as qualified as their male recipients, that they were systemically paid less, like the pay gap as well, that women who were that pregnant women were discriminated against, that women were discriminated against because they thought they'd get pregnant. There were some specific examples that were called out as well. It's a whole lot of stuff. And by the way,
Yeah.
I just want to preface this by saying like a bit of a trigger warning for folks, because there's a lot of bad stuff in there, including suicide. And I'll mention that point real quick because I think that's probably the point that's really getting a lot of people's attention. They said that there was a woman who I think has been unnamed right now, who took her own life while she was on a business trip with her supervisor, due to the amount of uh, abuse, gendered abuse, and
Mhm.
harassment that she'd received, including people passing around nude photos of her at a company event, at a company Christmas party, I think it was.
Mm.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's been the conversation. I think this broke on Wednesday.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
Like right in the middle of GDC. Once again, if anyone didn't know, GDC was going on.
What is
Yeah.
And
GDC?
yeah,
Yeah.
and
What is GDC? Look at last week's show.
the Game Developers Conference. What was GDC? It feels like compared to what GDC was
Right.
this year. But Game Developers Conference, which is it's an industry focused conference. It's focused for industry professionals like that. And
Mhm.
usually we all meet in San Francisco once a year, and there's lots of conventions and talks and summits and all kinds of stuff. Actually, we talked about it. I think was it last week? I think
It
we
was
did a
last
talk.
week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
check out last week's episode. You get a detailed description of what GDC is. It was all online this year, obviously, because of the pandemic continues. But this news dropped right in the middle of GDC, and
Yeah.
I don't know if that's coincidental or not, but it got a lot of eyes against this,
Mhm.
and that was basically what from Wednesday on. That was the entire discussion in my gaming
So
circles and chats.
Yeah, very very much so. And just to fill
yeah.
in a few of the gaps you mentioned there, yeah, this was this is the state of California, so basically the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing.
Thank you. Mm.
They described the company as having quote unquote frat boy culture.
Culture. Mhm.
As you mentioned, denying promotions to female employees, engaging in sexual banter, openly joking about rape. Um, and yeah, other little things like you mentioned, with like women not being promoted. They also talked about women were criticized for picking up children during daycare, and women being kicked out of lactation rooms so that male employees could have rooms for
Meetings.
meetings.
That's right.
Yeah,
Oh.
so there is a whole lot of stuff. This was
Oh.
a 2 year. This was a 2-year investigation, and this lawsuit was just filed. Um, yeah, Leon, I think you had something you wanted to mention here.
Yeah, just that, one, recognize that, this is the canary in the procedurally generated dungeon, right? So
Yep.
this is
Yep.
not unique to this particular company. Two, that, I'm male, but I'm also a minority, and recognizing that these kind of issues affect us all. The same kind of people that are generating this sort of toxic environment are women, are going to be doing it to minorities. So this is everyone's problem, whether whether you're a woman or not. And then lastly, it's just, for a lot of people, they think of Blizzard as a company that makes some of the greatest games of our generation, right? Everything, literally almost everything they touch has been a hit. And we're getting some insight into how the sausage has been made, and it's ugly, right? And so just keep in mind that in many ways, those of us who've been buying their games for the last 20 plus years have been empowering this kind of behavior against women, and that's a problem.
Yeah,
I
and
just
I just want to mention also, like, I've seen it in several headlines where they kind of refer to like the company, where in the lawsuit refers to Blizzard of having quote unquote frat boy culture. So I just want to kind of like get folks' thoughts on this as to like frat boy culture and using that kind of like terminology, frat boy culture, locker room talk, boys will be
Hmm.
boys. Chuck, what do you think about that?
And I mean, they actually had cube crawls where they would get really drunk during the workday and make people crawl from cube to cube drinking. And while women were crawling, they would make jokes at them, grope them, and
Mm,
threaten them with rape.
yeah,
Like, what?
yeah.
What? I'm tripping. Who are the men that are sitting around listening to jokes being directly towards your coworkers about rape and thinking that's okay?
But the
The
thing,
sad thing is, it's everybody over there. I mean,
yeah,
like, it's
That
really not that
like
rare. Like, I can mention like when I was at EA,
mhm
I joined. There was a team that I joined,
mhm.
and the first thing one of the supervisors said to me is like, "Hey, Sheree, you don't mind if we talk about other women in the office, do you?" Like,
Yeah,
and I'm
we
like, what am I supposed to answer to that? I'm the only woman on the team. There's four other
so
guys. They're like, we're going to talk about other women in the office. Do you
so we
mind?
had
when
this
I went to work at
conversation.
not to rag on EA or anything like that. It was my first job in the game industry, and it was 20 years ago. I was one of two women that like the first woman who had been hired on the floor in like 6 months. One of two women, 300 guys that we worked with, and it came out a few weeks after I got hired that before I started, between me getting hired and me starting, my manager had a "don't make me fire you" conversation with all of the men on the floor, which was essentially, there will be women working here. There haven't been women working here for many, many months. Don't make me fire you. And that was interesting to hear about that for me, right? Because it was like, first of all, who are you hiring that you need to have this conversation with? And then also, since that information was kept from me, I'm like, wait a second, do you think that there are some sexual predators in this room that you just hired me and one other woman to work on this floor? And we weren't, like, I found out about this by accident. We weren't even clued into like something that could have been like something directly related to our safety. Like, why is this accepted? Why? This is why I hate terms like locker room talk or
Hmm.
boys will be boys, when it's like, no, it's like actual sexual
It
harassment and
it
violent and like
it
verbal abuse. Like
it's Lord of the Flies just
it
happened, and there's no
it makes
adults
it
in the room.
it
Mhm.
makes it feel almost fun when we say it's locker room talk instead of like
It's
Yeah.
not.
saying it's like verbal abuse or saying that it's like that
Frat
it's
boy
illegal sexual
culture.
harassment.
I
Yeah,
I once
you
worked
know.
at a studio, and I heard many years before they were bought by Activision that they had to clean up themselves. And they had no people of color working for them and no women.
Mm, yeah.
Well, no black people working for them and no women.
Yeah.
Let me be
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
specific. And that they
So,
had to clean up the whole entire studio before they can get purchased by Activision.
Mm.
mm,
So
interesting.
Travis, you look like you have something in your mind.
now. I mean,
Like,
this is
let's
this
all
is
take a
this
moment.
is
Let's all take a moment and just get our sighs out because
Yeah. It,
this,
I mean, this is
it's
this is
exhausting.
this is serious. It's
yeah,
like, and when I see stuff like this, I go back and I try to like do an audit on myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I got into this industry when I was 19, right? Um, and so, although I've never gone there, I'm sure there's things that I shouldn't have said. I'm sure there's behavior that I shouldn't have taken part of. Um, I'm sure there are things that I shouldn't have co-signed, even silently. You see what I'm saying? Um, so that's why it hits, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's not enough to just to for it to for you not to co-sign it. It's you have to go further than that, right? um it's funny because I feel like I had this moment of clarity when I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, is this what white people feel like when black people tell you like how things are, like for real,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they instinctively start to try to absolve themselves from it in such a way where they'll tell you, I don't see color, or or everybody's the same, and it's
Or
not.
not all men?
Or
Is
not
that
all
the?
men,
Mm.
or whatever, right? And recognizing that just makes me feel very small, right? Because I know I could do better, right? And rather than saying, that's not me, I just need to have a different mentality, which is to say, when I even think I see it, I need to say something. I need to be very
Mm-hmm.
proactive in the opposite direction. And um, so reading that was terrifying. And it's not cool.
I I think to add on to what Travis is saying, and this is for I've been in situations professionally where I've seen racial things and I've spoken up. And that's hard and it's terrifying, right? Again, you're that one person in 300, and when they're doing the lifeboat scenarios, you don't for promotions and reviews, you don't want to be on the bottom, right? So that's hard, right? There's a name for this. It's called the bystander effect, and it's very difficult and it requires a lot of inertia to overcome.
Mhm.
However, we must. So I have a good friend of mine. She's a product unit manager over in the Xbox software group. She's been a manager and mentors me for many years, and we often have discussions about, particularly in the last year, about Black Lives Matter and the racial issues that we've had. And I called her up, and I basically said, look, you have asked how you could be an ally to me. Given this, how can I be an ally to you? As Travis says, we have to be active, right? It is scary when you're like, man, they can manage me out for this. I got a mortgage, I got mouths to feed. But if I expect other people to make that same sacrifice for me, if they see something bad this racial, how can I do any less? How can I demand equality for myself if I'm not willing to stand up for other people? So it's hard. No matter what your industry is, we have to stand up to this, right? We say frat boy frat boy culture and boys will be boys. And one thing I'll say about those descriptions is it's childish, right? It's
Thank
it's
you.
childish. And these are
Thank you.
supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
grown men running companies. And this is not how men act. This is not how I was raised to act around women. And it disgusts me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like the thing I would say is you act, stand up, do something, but we can't let this affect the women that we work with. And actually, just one more quick point from a corporate perspective, it's stupid. Some of the most
Yeah.
effective some of the most effective executive producers I've worked with have been women, right? You look at these companies that make mistakes where they run into something and they put something racist or sexist out. What saves you from that is diversity.
Yep.
People in senior positions at your company speaking up and saying, maybe that's a little racist, or maybe that's a little bit sexist. Maybe we shouldn't put that in our game or our ad or whatever. That saves you millions of dollars in apologies and destructions of your brand. So it is stupid to facilitate an environment that is not conducive to having strong, diverse voices within your company, because that's only going to make you more successful. Racism, sexism, this stuff is expensive and it's stupid, and
Yeah.
we really got to fight it.
And if you don't know, just ask. If you don't know, just ask people. Like, right before this show, I asked the twins a question just about sensitivities, and they corrected me. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with that because they can clearly tell if you're asking, you give a damn,
Yeah.
right? You wanna correct yourself, because we all grew up a little differently. We all have different like sensitivities and whatnot. And if it's no skin off your back, to just correct certain behavior that helps out, your fellow person, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? And so just ask people.
One thing
Yeah.
we should eventually cover too, and maybe we can do this a long topic one day, is how to be an ally. Because I think a lot of people theoretically
Mm-hmm.
know what they should do, but when they're confronted with it, they seize up. And I think that'd be a great thing for us to talk about. Some even at the end of this call, we can talk about uh, specific actions that people can
Yeah.
take to break out of that bystanderism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here's one other thing I want to mention because after this broke, you know, first of all, a lot of Activision Blizzard's like all of their social media and stuff has gone silent, unsurprisingly. Um, there have been a couple statements that were put out by Activision Blizzard. Some of the statements. The statements that were put out by the actual company were kind of a little like combative because they're like, oh, they're the Department of Fair and Equal or fair and equal employment. They're bringing up things that were put that happened 10 years ago, and we have worked hard to like over the last couple of years to try and like correct the culture issues, which, mind you, by saying you worked hard to try and correct the culture issues, it's an acknowledgement that there are cultural issues that are happening.
Also, if you said it happened 10 years ago and it's also happening like 3 weeks ago, I'm like, it sounds like you didn't
Mhm.
solve it.
It sounds like there's a
doesn't-
pattern there.
10 years ago doesn't sound like, oh, that was 10, that abuse was 10 years ago. Let's focus on the abuse from last week. I'm like, that sounds like you're describing a systemic issue, guys.
I know, and actually, I mean, a couple of the people like this is I think the CEO put out a statement, um, and this is one of the things that always like it in some ways amuses me because you always have like a company that'll put out a statement and they'll be like, "This is unacceptable, completely unacceptable," and I'm thinking,
Zero tolerance.
but yeah, zero tolerance, and I'm like, but you've tolerated it, and it has been acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point does it become completely unacceptable? Maybe they're talking about future tense. I'm not really sure. But the reason I want to actually talk a little bit about this also is I want to talk about this is not the first time this has come up. I mean, maybe this is very, it's very prominent. It's in the news right now because like it's actually a state like taking action. It's not just like allegations that are being
Mhm.
made by some of the employees. But this is not the first time gaming has like come to this moment.
No.
And I just wanted to see, like, can someone talk a little bit about, like, because I believe this was circulating like last year when we were talking about gaming's Me Too moment and stuff like that. So maybe we can
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny because as sad as it is, yeah, it was about this time last year, like June of last year, we were talking about the Me Too movement running through games.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember what the specific thing was that kicked it off. That's what's sad about it is that, it's like when we talk about systems and the pervasiveness of this sort of toxicity in our industry, it's like I remember I remember the time, but I don't remember the exact event. But yeah, I think the thing to really sort of hammer in here is, I know that last year it was some other company. This year, previous years it's been Riot. Riot had a big had a big lawsuit that was brought against somebody. It was about 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Ubisoft. I think it was Ubisoft last year actually that was also dealing with it. It's not just Activision. It's not
Yeah.
just Blizzard. Like that's the thing that I think, because I've been seeing a lot of folks online who've been saying, well, let's just boycott Activision Blizzard. Like that's the solution. Just boycott them. And I'm like, are you going to boycott all games? Because
Yeah.
what I'm telling you, like, this is not just a problem with a single company. Some companies might have specific examples or might have particularly big spikes in how horrible
Mm-hmm.
events. But trust me, like what happens at these companies so often is that when this stuff gets when the light and of truth and error come in and they get found out and these companies get people get let go or fired or you're allowed to quietly leave, they just evaporate. They go off to found other companies.
Yeah.
Or they
Yep.
go off to like smaller companies. And so there's also this misperception. It's like, oh, just the big companies. It's a problem at just the Activisions and the Blizzards and the Ubisoft. I'm like, guys, no. I mean, at smaller companies, a lot of indie companies don't even have an HR to like even pretend
Yes.
that they have folks to protect employees from this stuff. When we say it's a universal problem, we really do mean it's a universal
It
problem.
really is.
And just to add to that, right? Like just to look at Blizzard and look at how diverse their characters are in their games, right? They had a black paladin, they had women in Diablo. You look at all the people in Overwatch. So from the outside, you would think, oh, they're a little more progressive, right? Like they're these
Yeah.
they're hitting these beats that other people aren't hitting as consistently, and it's just like, nope, festering cesspool.
Yeah,
So
Let's not throw the baby away with the bathwater. Okay, like inside these companies, there are plenty of people who believe differently and act differently. But yes, but their bosses or their management or their companies in general should be held accountable for this,
well,
right?
and
So
yeah,
that's
I
all I'm
don't,
saying is that you can
I don't, and that's fair. And my intention there is not to say the entire company is trash. My intention there is to say from the outside, it might be easy to assume
yeah.
that this is a more positive and pervasive environment when again, these elements exist even in a place we would think was probably better than other companies. So that was my intention.
No, we
Yeah.
tend to assume that this is like you just a few bad apples, right?
Ah,
And
Yeah.
if you just get rid of the this person, this person, this person, okay, they're out, cool.
We're
Now we're
good.
good, right? And it's like, no, it's not good because if I'm sure everyone who's watching this probably knows that there's more than just a few bad apples, as the saying. A few
Yeah.
bad apples spoil the bunch. So if you think about the fact
Mhm.
that these companies and these cultures have been persisting for a lot of cases decades, and this behavior has gone unchallenged for decades, and it's not that women and people of color and LGBTQIA and any folks from marginalized identities and marginalized sexual identities haven't brought this up. It's just that there's not a lot of us, and it's super easy to bury that, and it's super easy to get retaliatory. Like so many of the stories that we hear about this is because folks will say, well, why didn't you bring it up before? Why'd you wait 3 years or 5 years or 10 years? And it's like a lot of times people do bring it up,
Yeah.
but when you're
Yeah.
like literally like one or two, maybe five women that work in like a 300-person company, no women within the upper management or within the actual decision chain for stuff. Talk about we say people are marginalized. We mean marginalized on many different axes. And when we talk about allyship and why allyship is really important, especially in the moment, it's because like when black folks or when women or when folks are like in a meeting and something happens and you try and call out, we're the like we need allies to stand in front of us,
Yeah.
not to come to us afterwards and be like, hey, I really appreciate that point you made. It was really cool. I mean, I didn't want to say it in the meeting because like I didn't want to like put myself out there and become a target,
Keep
but I'm
my
really
job.
glad that you continue to be a target for everyone here. Like
Yeah.
that's what we need to get past because that's not allyship. Like that's just ego.
I want to
Yeah.
I
Totally.
want to I want to make a point here about why this is good. And what I mean by this is good is I mean like why we should encourage this representation. Um, the first story that we talked about today said that their consoles in 50% of the households. It's a known fact that if you actually talk about mobile gaming, for example, like women are the majority of mobile gamers. Um, I just want people just to sit back and think about what your entertainment would look like if women weren't a part of it. Like about making these stories, telling these stories, creating the art, creating the technology, and so on and so forth. And what we're doing is we're killing it. We are killing it because we are not letting these people tell their stories. We are not people, we're not, empowering other people to express themselves. And so I just want everyone to just sit back and imagine what it would be like without this representation in other forms of media.
Yeah.
Whether or not we're talking about television, we're talking about movies, we're talking about comics, we're talking about novels. I mean, seriously, people, technology, all those things. Like if you start alienating, half of your population, we all suffer.
Yeah.
We all suffer, right?
Mhm.
And so it just makes sense for you to empower people who are not like you, because damn it, you just never know what you're going to get in exchange. But I guarantee you, it won't be less. It
Yeah.
won't.
And just to kind of harken back, I think Leon, you mentioned it before when you were talking, and Sis, you were talking about this as well. Um, where it's kind of like people will say, "Oh, well, why didn't you bring this up before?" And we're like, "We did bring it up before, right?" This is the other thing. And I
Bill
think Leon,
Cosby effect.
yeah, it really is, right? I mean, I think you mentioned this, Leon, where it's just like HR is not necessarily your friend. HR is there to protect the company. Like
Mhm.
many times, if you go to HR, yeah, they're there to protect the company. You often times have to go to like forums and find functions outside of the company, like the EEOC,
Yep.
or like government and state agencies that regulate the companies in order
Mhm.
to get some kind of relief. And sometimes people don't want to have to deal with that, right? And so, yes, I mean, we can say, well, why didn't you say this before? They probably did, or they may have raised it before, but because there's so much inertia here, and because there are oftentimes bystanders who don't really want to kind of like jump in and actually like proactively support this, or like, or to call out these issues. It is very easy for this culture to persist. One last thing I'll kind of mention on this, is that, you know like when I talk to friends and talk to people, like, and they're really interested in gaming and they want to go into gaming and stuff like that, I feel like we have to have a version of the talk. We always talk about the talk that Black parents have to have with their kids.
Mhm.
And there's a version of the talk that like women will have with other like young women or people who want to go into gaming, to be like, hey, there's a lot of great things about going into this industry, but here's things you need to know about going into this industry, right? Because I don't want people to be taken off guard like I was caught off guard, about like some of the things that you will encounter, and some of these structures that are there that are really ingrained and are very difficult, and are gonna, that you're going to run into, like you will run into, and some of those frustrations you will have. Because I want people to be able to last in the industry. I want people to like, 12 years was my limit. 12 years, I was like, all right, I'm gonna stick with tech. I love tech, but let me just sidestep out of the gaming industry and I'll just watch from, like, from the outside here. But yeah, like 12 years is my limit for that. But I want people like my sister who's been in there for 20 years, like I want there to be more women who stay there, because as Travis was mentioning, like those are important voices which are falling out of the industry because of a toxic environment, and it needs to, we need to find ways to improve it. And we need to be active about that.
Yeah, and I made a point earlier about folks saying, "Oh, we should just boycott Blizzard. We should just boycott whichever company is in the news today." And then it's so interesting to me, like how we go in cycles and how short our time, our memory is, right? Because
Yeah.
Mhm.
like this is not the first time the allegations of abuse have been brought up. Probably not the first time for this company either, and certainly not the first time in the industry. Even in the last 5 years, there even the other thing, like last year, was talking about the amount of overwork that the folks at Naughty Dog experienced in order to get The Last of Us out the door. And I remember seeing a couple of articles that were written that were saying, "Hey, we shouldn't support this. By the way, Game of the Year. By the way, how many
Yeah.
nominations did I see Last of Us 2 just get at the GDC Awards on Wednesday? Basically, like at least like 60% of the awards was Last of Us 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and Hades were like at least nominees for it. So it's, to me, it was really interesting juxtaposition to see Hades and Last of Us 2 when it's like, hey, we let people go home at 5, and like, hey, we don't let people go home, and those things sitting next to each
Yeah.
other, and we reward it. Like we do this whole thing in our brains. The
Yeah.
whole concept of separating the art from the artist is, to me, one of the most toxic concepts that even exist in the English language, because it allows us to get away from engaging with the often toxic tendencies of the person who created the thing that we like. And then it makes us still feel like, well, I know this person is, morally toxic and, poison, but they made this thing I really enjoy. And I'm not saying that, like, once again, like all your faves are problematic. Like, I'm not saying that you cannot engage with problematic with content that was created by problematic people, because that would basically limit us to, like, I don't know, like one book
Just
that
Technubians, only
just
Technubians.
Technubians. No, we're
Yeah,
kind of problematic
that's
too.
it.
But
Mhm.
But the point is, you cannot separate the art from the artist. And that's actually something that us as consumers of art and as consumers of creative properties need to get through our heads. That like it is also like we also own responsibility for the stuff that we consume, because like Leon said, when you run your credit card or do your PayPal or whatever for whatever when you buy something, you're helping to support that thing. And use your dollars. Your dollars are your voice, almost more so than
Mhm.
anything else. That's what companies pay attention to.
So very true. All right, folks. I know we are coming right upon the end of our show. So I do want to thank everybody for this discussion though, because I mean this has been really interesting, and I think it's a really important discussion. We need to continue to have this, right? Because the thing I will mention, I don't want us to get stuck in this like we just talked about it phase, that we get stuck about in everything, and then like a year from now we are talking about the next lawsuit or the next allegations or whatever, for another game company, or maybe who knows, the same game company. Action really is the most important thing here, and I think what you were talking about before Shanae, about like actually having a show about like how to actually be an ally and how to kind of move beyond the talk and discussion and research phase and actually into like the action phase will be really important. So thank you all for like this conversation, because like I said, this is really important stuff, and I love talking about it with you folks because I mean, y'all are all brilliant, and I know we're all trying to just make everything better for the industry. So
Don't tell Travis that. His head's gonna get even bigger.
I don't know if that's possible, but
Yeah,
we
I
can
don't.
certainly try.
I don't either, but there's lots of space on the screen, man.
Oh wow, wow.
Oh my god.
All right, I want to get a shout out to Digital Click for all the creative that they provide for each and every show here.
Mhm.
If you want to learn more about Technubians and Travis's big head, then make sure you hit up technubians.com. That's techn00bians.com. Please follow us here on Twitch. And if you like our vibe and want to learn more about game development and everything geek, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, please follow us on all our socials. Search the Geekish Network for all major social media platforms. So check out the schedule for the shows for the Geekish Network. We're gonna have tonight Pod Squadron and Nerdtastic tomorrow. So I think that's everything. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your support, and we will see you all next week. Everyone, have a lovely rest of the weekend.
Take care,
All
y'all.
right, see you all.